It started, as these things often do, with something utterly mundane. A plain white envelope. My name, David, typed neatly, no return address. At first, I assumed it was junk mail, another credit card offer, or a flyer for a local pizza place. I almost tossed it, but something, a prickle of unease maybe, made me hesitate. I ripped it open, my stomach dropped. Violation notice. My eyes scanned the stark, official-looking letterhead, Fairview Heights Homeowners Association. Unauthorized vehicle and driveway. Unauthorized? What unauthorized vehicle? I don't own some beat-up RV or a rusted-out pickup. I reread it, heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. This had to be a mistake. The only thing in my driveway, besides my perfectly respectable sedan, was my helicopter, and that was definitely authorized. It wasn't some rich guy indulgence. It was a necessity, a tool of my trade, approved by the governor himself. My job, well, let's just say it involves a lot of urgent travel, the kind where minutes matter, and the interstate isn't always an option. The doorbell rang, a shrill, insistent sound that mirrored the growing knot of anxiety in my gut. I opened the door to her. Karen. Everyone in Fairview Heights knew Karen. Short, sculpted blonde hair that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, designer sunglasses perched on her head even though it was overcast, and an expression that could curdle milk. She wasn't just an HOA member, she was the HOA president. "You got our letter," she stated, arms crossed, a smug little smile playing on her lips. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I did," I replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle and fake. "I don't think it applies to me." Her smile vanished. "It applies to everyone," she snapped. "No helicopters. It's an eyesore. It's against the rules." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice level. "It's state property. I work for the governor. He approved it." Karen's lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. "I don't care who you work for. This is my neighborhood and I make the rules." There was something in her eyes, though, a flicker of, was it sadness? Or something else I couldn't quite place. For just a split second I saw something beyond the arrogant facade, a flash of something vulnerable, quickly hidden beneath a carefully crafted mask of control. Then I noticed it. A small, intricate tattoo on her wrist, partially hidden by her expensive blouse. Some kind of tribal design. It seemed out of place. The image of the tattoo, that fleeting glimpse of something hidden, triggered a memory. A night, years ago. The acrid smell of gunpowder, the shouts, the chaos, the weight of a fallen comrade in my arms. I had been younger then, more idealistic, less careful. That night had changed everything. It had taught me the importance of staying alert, of anticipating danger, of never letting my guard down. It was a lesson etched in my soul, a constant reminder of the price of failure. And that feeling, that gut-level sense of unease, was back now, stronger than ever. Something was very, very wrong. The unsettling feeling from that encounter with Karen lingered. I tried to dismiss it, chalk it up to HOA nonsense. But the memory of that tattoo, that fleeting glimpse of something hidden beneath her polished exterior, kept nagging at me. I went back inside, the violation notice crumpled in my hand. I tossed it on the kitchen counter, trying to focus on work, but the unease persisted. The next morning, the first accident happened. I walked out to my car, ready to head to the Capitol, and found a bright orange HOA violation sticker plastered across my helicopter's windshield, the same kind Karen had threatened. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a warning, it felt like a deliberate provocation. I ripped it off, the adhesive leaving a sticky residue. "Ridiculous," I muttered. trying to convince myself. But as I drove, I noticed something else. My car felt off. The steering was pulling slightly to the right. I pulled over, inspected the tires, and found the front left one almost flat. Not a puncture, but a clean, deliberate slash. "Okay, this is not a coincidence," I said aloud, my voice tight with anger and a growing sense of dread. That evening, another incident. I was working late, reviewing some documents the governor had sent when I heard a crash outside. I rushed to the window, peering through the blinds. My trash cans were overturned, their contents strewn across my front yard. It wasn't the wind, it was a calm night. Someone had deliberately done this. The next morning, a cryptic text message from an unknown number. "Eyesore, remove it." Chills ran down my spine. This was escalating. I'd had enough. I marched over to Karen's house, my fists clenched. She answered the door, that same smug smile plastered on her face. "Morning," she chirped, the sound grating on my nerves. "Cut the crap, Karen," I said, my voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "The stickers, the tires, the trash, this is you, isn't it?" Her smile didn't falter. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped. "You threatened me. You said you make the rules." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I do. And I also know things about you, things you wouldn't want getting out." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my heart pounding. She just chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Let's just say I have resources. You might want to think twice before crossing me again." "Are you threatening me?" I was furious. "I am just giving you an advice." She laughed it. I stormed back home, my mind racing. Karen's words, her veiled threat. It was more than just HOA power games. This felt personal, dangerous. I called the governor. "Sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we have a situation." I explained everything, the violations, the accidents, Karen's threats. The governor listened in silence, his usual jovial tone replaced by a grim seriousness. "This is concerning," he said finally. "More concerning than you might realize." "What do you mean, sir?" He hesitated. "There are sensitivities involved, things I can't discuss over the phone. Just be careful, David, very careful. And don't confront Karen directly again. I'll handle this from my end." "But, sir..." "That's an order," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be in touch." The line went dead. I was left standing there, phone in hand, feeling more uneasy than ever. The governor's reaction. It wasn't just concern for a damaged helicopter. It was something more. Something he wasn't telling me. And that, I realized, was the most terrifying part of all. This was a new game, more complicated and dangerous. The governor's cryptic warning hung in the air, heavier than the humid summer night. I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait. Karen was escalating, and whatever sensitivities the governor was talking about, they clearly weren't stopping her. I needed help. I needed information, and I needed it fast. My first call was to Mark, a former colleague from my previous life, the one before I started working for the governor. Mark was a master of digging up dirt, a digital archaeologist who could unearth secrets buried deep beneath layers of bureaucracy and encrypted files. "Mark, it's David," I said, keeping my voice low. "I need a favor, a big one." "Always happy to help an old friend," Mark replied, his voice a familiar, comforting growl. "What kind of trouble are you in?" "HOA trouble," I said, then quickly corrected myself. "More than that, it's complicated." I explained the situation, leaving out the classified details of my work, but emphasizing Karen's increasingly aggressive behavior and the governor's strange reaction. "Sounds like you've stepped on someone's toes," Mark said thoughtfully, "or someone's very expensive landscaping." "It's more than that," I insisted. "There's something else going on here. I'll see what I can find," Mark promised. "Give me 24 hours. My next stop was Lon, my next-door neighbor. Lon was a retired lawyer, sharp as a tack, and with a surprisingly detailed knowledge of HOA bylaws. "Lon, I need your legal expertise," I said, showing her the violation notices and recounting the events of the past few days. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is harassment, plain and simple," she said, tapping the pipers with a manicured finger. "And potentially illegal, depending on how they're enforcing these so-called rules." "I know, but Karen?" "Karen is a bully," Lan interrupted, her voice firm. "But bullies thrive on fear and intimidation. We need to fight back, legally." The next day, Mark called back. His voice was serious. "You were right," he said. "This is bigger than an HOA dispute. Karen Walker, she's got a history." He proceeded to lay it all out. Karen had been involved in a major lawsuit years ago, a messy legal battle that had cost her family their fortune. She'd lost everything: her home, her business, her reputation. And the lawsuit, Mark discovered, had ties to a powerful real estate developer, a man named Richard Jones, known for his ruthless tactics and questionable connections. "Jones is bad news," Mark said. "And Karen, she's been working for a law firm that represents him, a small, shady outfit known for bending the rules." My stomach clenched. This wasn't just about a helicopter anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that connected Karen, Jones, and possibly even the governor. "What kind of law firm?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The kind that specializes in aggressive negotiations," Mark said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "They've been filing a lot of lawsuits lately, targeting properties in your neighborhood, property disputes, harassment claims, even some HOA violations." A chill ran down my spine. This was a coordinated attack. That evening, as I was reviewing the information Mark had sent, I saw him. A figure standing across the street, shrouded in the shadows. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie. He wasn't moving, just watching. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but then he stepped into the streetlight. His face was hard, expressionless, his eyes cold and empty. This wasn't some random thug. This was someone who knew what he was doing. Mark had mentioned a name: Daniel Carter. Karen's right-hand man, ex-con. History of violence. This was him. I knew it. He was sending a message, and the message was clear. "We know where you live. We're watching you, and we're not afraid to play dirty." My hand trembled as the man gave me a slight nod, a smirk, and turned back, disappearing in the night. The sight of Daniel, that cold, calculating stare, confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just about a power-hungry HOA president anymore. It was a deliberate, calculated campaign of intimidation. Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like an approaching threat. The next morning, I woke to a sound that shattered the pre-dawn quiet, a loud, sickening crunch. I bolted out of bed, heart hammering against my ribs, and raced outside. My stomach dropped. My helicopter, my beautiful state-issued helicopter, was a mangled wreck. The windshield was shattered. The tail boom twisted at an unnatural angle. The rotor blades bent and broken beyond repair. A massive tow truck, its mechanical arm still attached to the mangled chopper, was parked halfway in my driveway, blocking the street, and standing beside it, arms crossed, a triumphant smirk on her face, was Karen. "You did this," I said, my voice a choked whisper, barely audible above the ringing in my ears. She didn't even bother to deny it. "I warned you," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I told you there would be consequences." The tow truck driver, a burly man with a nervous look on his face, approached me hesitantly. She said she had legal authority," he stammered, showed me some papers. I didn't hear the rest. My world was spinning. Rage, disbelief, and a cold, hard fear warred within me. This wasn't just property damage, it was a blatant attack, a deliberate act of sabotage. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking so badly I could barely dial. "Sir," I said when the governor answered, my voice cracking, "we have a major problem. My helicopter, it's been destroyed." Within 30 minutes, the quiet suburban street was swarming with black SUVs. The governor's security detail, grim-faced and efficient, secured the area. The governor himself, his face a mask of barely controlled fury, stepped out of one of the vehicles. Karen's smirk had vanished. She took a step back, her eyes wide with alarm. "Who is responsible for this?" The governor boomed, his voice echoing through the neighborhood. Karen swallowed hard. Sir, this man." She gestured weakly at me. The governor cut her off. "This man is my employee. That helicopter was state property, and you destroyed it." I didn't know," Karen stammered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Did you ask?" the governor thundered. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to me. "Press charges, full charges." He turned back to look at Karen. "I will make sure you pay for this, one way or another." Before he left, the governor turned to face me, lowering his voice. "We need to talk. This is bigger than it seems." I nodded. Fear was building up inside me. What has Karen gotten herself into? I was expecting her to be arrested, yet days pass and nothing happened. Instead, I was the one receiving mails. Not just any mails, lawsuits, a lot of lawsuits, targeting me, Lon, even Mark got one. Karen is not backing down. The lack of immediate action against Karen, despite the governor's initial fury, was baffling. Days turned into weeks, and the lawsuits kept piling up. Frivolous, baseless claims designed to drain our resources and break our spirits. It was a war of attrition, and Karen was clearly playing the long game. I felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that this was just the prelude to something far worse. Then it happened. A phone call, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, my gut screaming at me to ignore it. But something, a morbid curiosity perhaps, made me pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice guarded. A slow, chillingly familiar voice came through the speaker. "Miss me?" My blood turned to ice. It was Karen, but that was impossible. She was supposed to be, "You sound surprised," she purred, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Good behavior, reduced sentence. I'm out." My mind reeled. How? How could she be out so soon? It didn't make sense, unless she had help. Powerful help. "You have a restraining order," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to project a confidence I didn't feel. "Oh, I know," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I just wanted to let you know, I haven't forgotten about you, or your little friends." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. Karen was back, and this time she wasn't just playing games. This was a declaration of war. The subtle harassment started again, but now it was different, more sophisticated, more sinister. Instead of overt acts of vandalism, it was things that were hard to prove. security camera footage that mysteriously glitched for crucial minutes, anonymous reports to the city about zoning violations on my property, all unfounded, of course. It was a constant, low-level hum of anxiety designed to keep me off balance. I called Mark, my voice urgent. "Karen's out, and she's not alone." "I figured as much," he said grimly. "I've been digging deeper. That law firm she's working for? It's not just representing Richard Jones, it is Richard Jones. He's the silent partner pulling the strings." "And the lawsuits?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "They're targeting a specific area," Mark confirmed. "Your neighborhood and the surrounding blocks. Jones wants that land. He's been trying to buy it up for years, but some of the residents, including you, have refused to sell." It all clicked into place. The helicopter, the HOA violations, the harassment. It was all part of a larger scheme, a coordinated effort to drive us out, to force us to sell. And Karen, fueled by her own personal vendetta, was Jones's weapon of choice. "This isn't just about revenge," I said, my voice filled with a newfound understanding. "It's about money and power." "Exactly," Mark agreed, "and they're playing for keeps." That night, I got my confirmation. I was working late, reviewing the legal documents Lan had gathered, when a motion sensor alert popped up on my phone. My driveway camera. I clicked on the live feed. At first, I saw nothing. Just the empty driveway, bathed in the soft glow of the security lights. Then, a flicker of movement. A figure emerging from the shadows near the edge of my property. It was Daniel. He was back. He stood there for a moment, his face hidden by the hood of his sweatshirt, his hands shoved into his pockets. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket. My breath caught in my throat. Was it a weapon? A Molotov cocktail? Just as a police car, responding to my earlier call, it turned onto my street, its lights flashing, Daniel pulled his hand out, empty. He gave me a slow, mocking smile, then turned and vanished into the night. He wanted me see him. He wanted to show me he is not afraid. He has backup, and it's not just Karen anymore. Daniel's reappearance, that blatant act of intimidation, was the final straw. This wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore, it was a full-scale assault, and we were all in the crosshairs. I knew I had to act, and act fast. "We're fighting back," I said, my voice firm, addressing Lan, Mark, and a small group of concerned neighbors who had gathered in my living room. I had shared everything. Karen's release, Daniel's reappearance, Jones's involvement, the mounting lawsuits. "They want a war? We'll give them a war," I declared. "A legal one." We spent the next few days gathering evidence, documenting every instance of harassment, every frivolous lawsuit, every connection between Karen, Daniel, and Richard Jones. Lan, with her legal expertise, drafted a powerful countersuit, alleging conspiracy, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Mark, with his digital skills, unearthed a trove of incriminating emails and financial records. I, leveraging my connections with the governor's office, secured the support of a top-tier law firm, one with the resources and the reputation to take on Jones and his cronies. The courtroom was a battleground. Karen, seated beside Daniel and a team of slick, expensive lawyers, radiated a smug confidence that bordered on arrogance, but I could see the cracks in her facade, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The evidence was overwhelming. We presented a clear, compelling case, meticulously documenting Karen and Jones's campaign of harassment and intimidation. We called witnesses, neighbors who had been targeted, former employees of Jones's law firm who had been forced to participate in unethical practices. "They are doing this for years, and it's time for it to stop," I said, looking straight to the judge. Then a bombshell. Mark, working late into the night, had discovered a hidden clause in the original HOA bylaws, a clause that Karen had conveniently overlooked, a clause that explicitly prohibited the kind of targeted harassment she had engaged in. And then, on a turn of event, during the trial, one of the neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, held a hand of her daughter. She was crying, begging for help. Her daughter has been bullied and stalked online. It was Daniel. Karen's face paled. Her lawyers sputtered, trying to deflect, to obfuscate, but it was too late. The truth was out. The judge looked furious. The judge ruled in our favor. Karen and Jones were found liable for substantial damages. Karen was disbarred, her legal career in ruins. Daniel faced criminal charges. The neighborhood erupted in cheers. We had won. Freedom Park, formerly known by another name, became the symbol of our victory. I stood in my driveway, watching the sunset, my third helicopter gleaming in the fading light. Peace, at last. Or so I thought. As I turned to go inside, my phone buzzed, unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a faint whisper, barely audible. Not over. The line went dead. My blood ran cold.